we are now joined by Jenson Button, who's the driver of the number 15 Mobile One Ford this weekend. Jenson, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you spending some time with us. Before we go to questions, do you mind just to give us your thoughts as you traveled into Chicago this weekend and kind of walked around the course this morning and before you came here to visit with us?
Yes. Well, first of all, good morning, everyone. It's pretty exciting to be here at the first ever street race in NASCAR. Chicago. Well, I flew in from LA. I live in LA. My wife's from California, so we flew in yesterday into Chicago. Humidity is the first thing that hits you when you jump off the plane, which we'll definitely have to deal with this weekend. But it's so cool, racing within a city. There aren't many racing drivers that get that opportunity. I've had the opportunity in Monaco, in Singapore, but not in a stock car. So this is a new, exciting opportunity for me. I think the racing is going to be out of this world exciting. We also have a bit of weather thrown into the weekend, possibility of rain and thunderstorms. So that always mixes things up. So looking forward to the action. And a big thank you to Mobile One for making this dream happen for me to race 3 races in Cup this year.
All right, we'll now go to questions from the media. If you have a question, raise your name, state your name and affiliation, and we'll work to get a mic to you as in the time that we have. We're going to kick off with Nate. We'll go to Bob, and then Mike Hembry as well.
Nate Ryan, NBC Sports. Jenson, have you walked the track yet?
I tried to, but they wouldn't let my wife on, so it was a no. So I'll be doing it tomorrow morning.
Why didn't they let her on?
She's got a VIP pass, so VIPs aren't allowed on yet. But
okay.
No, I'm gonna walk it tomorrow. I was always gonna walk it twice, once with the family, and then tomorrow morning with my crew chief and the team. So I'll be up bright and early at 7 a.m. when hopefully it's going to be a little bit cooler as well.
I'll try to ask some slightly more generic questions then. When you hear about a track that has as many 90-degree corners as this one does, as someone with so much street course experience, like what's your reaction to that? Are those passing opportunities? Is it like, wow, that's not ideal? Like, what do you think about that?
I mean, what's not ideal? I mean, we're here to get the best out of whatever we race on, right? So, it shouldn't be dictated by what we think is best for us in the car. We should deal with what's put in front of us. And 90-degree corners, it definitely gives us some opportunity to pass. Not every 90-degree corner is going to give you that opportunity. I think turn 1, turn 2, turn 5, and the last corner are the main overtaking places. Other sections of the track are too narrow, like turn 9, that long left-hander. It's quite a narrow section, but that has its own challenges of, first of all, keeping the car out of the wall, but trying to thread the needle through that section. It's going to feel extremely quick. The speeds won't be extremely high, but when the barriers are that close, it feels unbelievably fast, and it feels like they're narrowing on you throughout the race. So it's a challenging track. You got to throw the bumps into it. You've got the overpasses. It's going to be tough for us to learn in 50 minutes, and to have confidence in the car and the track to push it and brake where we think we can brake. Because one little lockup and you're in the wall. It's not like you have a safety net like you have on most road courses. So tricky, but well up for the challenge, and I think we can put on a good show here.
All right, Bob, go ahead.
Bob Parkhurst, Fox Sports. Would this track change any different in the wet than any other track? I mean, is it the same type of adjustment, or is there anything that you see that if it does rain, that's particularly different about this track?
Everything gets more difficult when it rains on any track, but especially a street course. One, because I don't know the last time it rained here, and the oils and from a road car, which will be on the track, you won't really have an issue with in the dry, but as soon as it rains, it becomes slick. So that's an issue. Bumps make it more difficult in the wet. There's no runoff, so if you one little lockup and you're in the wall, it's exactly the same as in the dry, but it's more likely to happen because there's so much less grip. Normally you would take wet lines, which would be a little bit different to dry lines, but you're limited because the circuit's so narrow. So it's basically finding a line that you feel comfortable with so you can get on the power as early as possible. But racing in the wet will be nuts. It'll be pretty crazy. Totally up for it. Most of the guys wouldn't have driven on street courses and most of the guys wouldn't have raced in the wet. So it's going to be mayhem out there, but in a good way, in a positive way. A little bit nuts, but like it's going to be a sprinkling of nuts, whereas in the wet it's going to be a shower of nuts.
All right, Mike, go ahead.
Mike Hembry from Auto Week. I realize you haven't done this yet. The cars you've been in street racing have been considerably more nimble. How do you see the big, heavier stock cars on courses like this? Is it something that can be done more often, twice a year, or how do you see that?
I like that it's, NASCAR's thinking outside the box and we're trying new things. Why not? There's so many races on the calendar. This is one in 38 races I think you guys do. So I like that we're trying something different. It is a big, heavy car. And I must admit, when I first drove it, I thought it would soak up the bumps a lot better than it does. And I think the reason is because the diffuser on the car, you have to run the car as low as possible to get the diffuser activated. So you're on the bump stop, so there's no suspension in these cars. Here, though, we've done so much work in the simulator to get it to a point where it's consistent and drivable, and it does soak up bumps. So I don't think that's an issue. The V8 supercars that race in Australia, they race on street courses all the time, and that's the same kind of philosophy, the same ideas behind the car itself. So we can make it work. It's just it's a very limited amount of time for us to get the car in a working range before qualifying, and the person that does will come out quickest.
All right, Dustin?
Dustin Long, NBC Sports. You mentioned the key overtaking places 1, 2, and 5. Those are all areas that have like surface changes as you transition. Can you explain the challenge and what you're going to try, or what each of you drivers are going to be trying to do to get through those corners and the challenges of those surface changes, and particularly in those areas?
Yeah, surface changes is always an issue, and especially when it's wet, that makes it even more difficult because concrete is very slippery when wet. You change your style to suit the material that you're driving on, I guess, the asphalt or the concrete. You might brake slightly earlier but harder if it's asphalt, to get all the braking done on the asphalt area before you step onto the concrete, so you've got most of the slowing down done. So turn one will be a tricky one. So yeah, walking the track is a must. So tomorrow, the hour that we have, we'll be really concentrating on where the concrete starts and the asphalt finishes. So that is really key for understanding the track and the different conditions. Also, when the rubber goes down, it will go down differently on concrete than asphalt. So it's also working that out, and the areas you can push the car, areas you need to look after the car. So maybe you're braking earlier into a corner, getting a better exit, and some corners you can brake later and use that grip of the asphalt. So it definitely throws something into it, into the mix of things to learn. But we all should be pretty good at that by now.
All right, go ahead.
Hi, Jenson. Jay Cohen with the Associated Press. You obviously have a ton of experience with street courses. Like, how does it test a driver compared to ovals and all the other traditional tracks? How does this type of format, test a driver?
I guess it's kind of similar to ovals in a way. You don't have the aero issues that you have on an oval, I guess. I've never driven an oval, so I don't know. But when you watch, you have lots of different issues with the airflow and what have you over the car and traffic and what have you. So you don't have that, but in terms of not much room for error, I think that's kind of similar to an oval. You make a mistake on an oval, you're in the wall. Here, exactly the same thing, but it can be entry, apex, and exit that you can find yourself in the wall here. So it has its unique challenges because you're using the brakes, you're modulating brakes, throttle all the way through the corner. But I expect the quick guys, which there's a lot of them in Cup, to get to grips with this place really quickly. I definitely have an advantage of racing street courses, but not in such a big car. It's always been in a single seater. So I don't think I'm so on the back foot like I probably was in Austin, but I definitely don't have a massive advantage coming here because I don't know the car as well as most. But I think you'll see a lot of us in qualifying touching the barriers here and there. As long as it's side on, it's okay, and you're not going to damage the toe links. But you got to be aggressive to get a lap time out of the car around here. But the problem is that's a lot of risk, and it's very easy to find yourself in the wall.
We had a question over here with Jerry.
Jerry Jordan, you kicking the tires.net. Guess you got in the sim last week. So what were those laps like? And you know, it kind of sucks you're not been on the course yet to compare. But what did you think the first time you were on the sim?
I spun coming out of the pits, so it wasn't a good start. But once you get up to speed, and you know the throttle control is nuts around here. You know, you've really got to modulate the gas pedal is what you call it here. There's a lot of modulation, especially because there's so many bumps. Laterally loaded, when you get on the throttle, it's really tough. You know, straight ahead traction's fine. But the big area I think that we'll be struggling with is turn 3 to turn 4. So that fast right kink before you turn right over the bridge in that really narrow part of the course, there's no room for error. And when you come through that turn 3, it's quite bumpy as you hit the brakes. So the car is moving so much through the braking zone. And trying to pick your apex point is really difficult. And it gets to a point where you have to think, am I going to make the corner or not? And you go, and at some point you go past the point of no return. You've turned in, and if you get it wrong, you're going to be in the wall. There is a point where you can go, I've braked too late, and turn left, go down the escape road, turn it round. So that for me is going to be the trickiest corner to get right, because there's the runoff area. You can brake late, you can be aggressive, but it gets to that point where you either choose to turn right or go straight.
All right, we have a question in the back with Kate. Go ahead, Kate.
Hi, Kate. Hi, Kate Wagner from Road and Track. This is obviously like a pretty new thing for NASCAR, and it seems like NASCAR is pulling from other motorsport. What do you think a race like this means for the fans, and like maybe pulling some elements from Formula One, from all of those things? Like, do you think this is going to have a big impact, or what?
I can only think of positives. You know, I don't see why anyone would be negative. It's one race in many. We're trying something new. I think it's exciting. We're going to see Cup cars, Xfinity cars racing on the streets of Chicago. I mean, it's pretty crazy, right? And I think it's a great challenge for everyone. For the organizers to put this on, I'm impressed. But also for everyone involved, the logistics is difficult. I know from previous experience of street races, for the teams, for the drivers, it's all a big learning curve. And I think to have got to this point already, we should congratulate everyone for what they've done. And hopefully we can repay that by putting on a great race this weekend. And we'll hopefully see more, street courses in the future. I want to see some racing in Europe. I think that's a good possibility, and I think the European fans are very on board with NASCAR at the moment, especially after the performance that we had at Le Mans. So there's a big fan base to tap into there of new fans, and I think that's one thing about racing in the streets here. There's a lot of new fans that come to the sport. You have to respect the people that have been a fan of this sport for decades, but you also want to bring in a newer, younger fan base to NASCAR, and this is a good way of doing that.
Okay, we have some additional questions in the back.
Well, one, we want to say this is exciting, right? The 75th year of NASCAR, doing something so innovative in a great city as Chicago. And this is history making, and we know that recently you've made history with having the quickest reaction time according to the Guinness Book of World Records. And you spoke on spinning out, coming when you let out with the simulation and track 3 and lane 3 and 4. How do you think this amazing feat that you've acquired with the Guinness Book with your reaction time, how does that play into you being the king of staying inside the white lines?
Inside the walls, which are the white lines here. Well, thank you. Yeah, it was a publicity thing that I did a few months ago. I had the world record of a Batak wall, it's called, how many lights you could extinguish in 30 seconds. And I had the record when I was in my 20s, and they said, "Do you think you can beat it?" And I said, "No way." But I did. So in my 40s, I have the world record for this Batak wall reaction test. So, and you're right, you need that around a place like this. These cars, they're not the quickest cars that I've driven, but it's reacting to what the car is doing, and it's such a narrow circuit here for these cars. Every experience I've had on street circuits, when you're in the race, it also feels like it gets narrower every lap. You know, it feels like they're narrowing in on you the barriers. And every racing driver will tell you this that's raced, for example, in Monaco or Singapore. It gets tougher and tougher each lap because the focus and concentration needed is way beyond anything else. So mentally, the drivers are going to get out of the car and be tired after this one. But reactions, yeah, they're going to be key, especially with the other 37 guys out there. It's pretty nuts on your own, but then you throw everyone else into the mix. It's going to be a great race to watch, especially for me to be in the mix. It'd be good. Yeah, a lot of fun.
All right, we're going to continue with questions. Hang with me a little bit. We're trying to get a microphone around the room. So go ahead.
Hi, I'm Scott Sargis with Public Television in Chicago. I have a question for you. On a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is the most difficult race you've ever run, 5 is average, and 1 is easy, how would you rate this and why?
It's a good question. It's difficult to give you a definitive answer as I haven't driven the course yet, but from my experience in the simulator, it's definitely tricky. These cars, they don't slow down like cars I'm used to. You know, I'd normally be braking at the 150-yard marker, and in the Cup car, you're at the 500-yard marker. So there's a lot going on from when you hit the brakes to getting into the corner, and one little slip up and you're in the wall. So I think mentally it's a very challenging race for us. The logistics of being in a city, it's not an issue for the drivers as much. You know, we stay across the road, we walk to the track, which is great. It's quite relaxed. But the actual race itself is going to be extremely challenging. You know, if I would put Monaco and Singapore as 2 very challenging courses in a racing car. I'd put them up at 8, and I would put this probably at a 9. Yeah, it would be just above in terms of challenges for all of us out there.
All right, we're going to come up from, we got one more in the back, and then we'll come up from. Go ahead.
Me. Andrew Clark from Auto Action in Australia. I'm so excited for this race. I actually came all this way, which is a pretty big trip. I've got 2 questions. Back on the simulator, did it have all the manhole covers and the surface changes and all that sort of stuff in there? I mean, you were talking about the bumps. Did you get all of that in as well?
Yeah, it's lasered. They lasered the track. I think the simulation that I drove was before they tarmacked a few of the sections lately, put new asphalt down. So it was before that. But yeah, in terms of where the bumps are and everything, for the bits they haven't changed, it was as it should be in reality. You know, it's very difficult to know the grip level. There's going to be a lot of dust out there, oils from cars driving on the streets. So there's lots of things to still learn, and also the way it's going to progress through the weekend. I mean, the grip level is going to go through the roof. When we first drive the track, it's going to be very low grip. I have questioned, as I'm in the A part of qualifying, not the B part, I have questioned whether it's fair, because B is going to be so much faster on a street circuit where it grips up so much more. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit unfair. I'd rather A was one side of the grid and B was the other side, but hey, it's not my regulations. It just means I got to qualify in the top 5.
And the second one, Shane Van Gisbergen spoke to the Australian.
That's why you're here, really.
No,
because Shane's here.
No, I booked before him. He followed me, I like to think. He talked yesterday about driving the NASCAR at the Roval the other day and talked about how he's surprised how well it turned in and all of those sort of things. And he's obviously driving a supercar. How do you find the NASCAR in that sense? And what's the difference between this one and the one you drove at Le Mans?
First of all, I'm more amazed that he actually got to test, because I didn't. In his race car as well. But no, it's great having Shane on board. I mean, whatever he jumps in, he's super competitive, and this is very what he's used to in terms of street courses. The weight of the car he's kind of used to, I guess, in V8 supercars. It might be a bit heavier. So I expect him to be very competitive this weekend. He'll be right at the front end. So hopefully I'll be racing with him and I'll be near him. I think for him to come across and say that it's got a lot of front grip and it turns in as he would hope, it's kind of surprising, but it's great to hear that. You know, the car's are in a good place where it's competitive against the V8 supercar. For me, compared to the Garage 56 car, it's very different. Yeah, we didn't have regulations, so we could do what we wanted, move the fuel tank forward, more power, more downforce, paddle shift. So we made it into a car that was very drivable. We had traction control. So it was the easiest car I've ever driven. So you go through the Porsche curves at Le Mans, a little bit of understeer all the way through, rear's really stable. No issues with this like we had in Kota, where the rear tire just gives up because there's no suspension, because you've got to run the diffuser on the ground. So we made it very easy to drive, which is what you need for an endurance race. So yeah, the Cup car's a lot more difficult, but doesn't matter. It means it's the same for all of us, and it's a challenge. So it's just getting on top of how the car is. And I think we've made a lot of progress from where I had the car in Kota to here, which so I'm looking forward to getting out there and seeing how it feels.
All right, we're going to come up front here. We have a question from Gluck, Jordan, and then we also have one up front here from Claire. So,
Hi, Jeff Gluck from The Athletic. What have your friends and former F1 colleagues been saying to you since you did the Coda race and now the Garage 56 thing as well? What, are they curious? They have questions, or they just think it's cool? What's their reaction been like?
I actually had lunch a couple of months ago with Rubens Barrichello, who was my teammate back in 2006 to 2009 in Formula One, and he heard about it. And he said, "What?" First of all, he's like, "Why? Why would you want to take Why would you want to take a stock car to Le Mans?" And I told him all about it. He still didn't get it. And then I think since the race, he'd have a very different opinion. Everyone that saw the car out on track loved it. It definitely brought something to Le Mans. Le Mans is such a special place anyway. 100th year. Hypercars are in a great place. But every time we went past grandstands, they would cheer. Every lap. Every lap the stock car went round, they cheered. And I think we definitely pulled in a lot of fans for NASCAR, which is great. Friends are very supportive. Competitors from F1 are very supportive of me racing NASCAR. They're like, "I'd love to give that a go." Daniel Ricciardo, I think we all know he's a big fan of NASCAR. Maybe we'll get him in a car in the next couple of years. Yeah, it's a great challenge, and I never thought I'd have the opportunity to race in Cup. I think it's every driver that's at the pinnacle of the sport would love the opportunity to jump around and try different things. And that's even F1 drivers. They'd love to try racing at Le Mans in top category, Indy, and racing in NASCAR and in Cup. So yes, it's a real, I feel very privileged to have that opportunity. So big thanks to Mobil 1.
all right, Jordan.
Jordan Bianchi, The Athletic. A couple questions for me. Kind of a follow-up a little bit. Could we see you in NASCAR more on a regular basis?
I have spoken about this, but for me, at this point in my life, it's just not possible. I mean, I couldn't do 38 weekends of the year. I've got 2 little kids, and I know some drivers can do it, and it works for them. For me, having so many years of racing already under my belt, of traveling and what have you, it's very difficult. And the thing is also, a lot of the stuff that I do would go away. Those deals that I have for years to come. So it puts me in an awkward situation. If I just did 1 or 2 years in NASCAR. So it's a dream to do a whole season, but I don't think it's actually a reality. I would love to keep doing one-off races and what have you, if that was an opportunity. But it's also not easy. I know that from a team's point of view to find a car or a charter that I could actually jump into for certain races.
Typically in NASCAR, the restarts are very aggressive. Drivers see that as an opportunity to get track position and hold it. Here, though, because it's expected to be, the restarts are expected to be very chaotic. Are you going to try to be more aggressive in getting spots, or do you back off and say, let them rack each other, and then I'm going to move forward from there?
You're definitely going to see different styles of racing here, I think. You are going to have the aggressors. You are going to have the drivers that sit back and just let it unfold, knowing there's going to be another restart anyway at the end of the race. So I think survival is the main thing, not having a car at the end of the race that's still working and everything's pointing in the right direction. So I mean, if you're quick enough and you're right at the front, you know, you're going to be aggressive from the word go. But if you're in the middle of the pack, yeah, you're going to be trying to stay out of trouble until 2/3 of the race is done, and you're still pointing in the right direction, and then you can, you know, push on hopefully for a good result. So if it's dry, it's going to be a real challenge. Overtaking is not going to be easy because there's no room for error. And if it's wet, it's just, it's 100 times more difficult. But I think we're all excited about this race. We have no idea how it's going to go. But, you know, I think we have to, as much as we should be respecting each other, probably more than we did in Kota, I think respecting the track is a big one as well.
All right, Claire.
Claire B. Lang, Sirius XM NASCAR Radio. So if you look at this race and you think about what you were mentioning at Le Mans, and you were talking about how people paid attention to it, or, you know, the impact of it, if you add Le Mans to this and this goes really well, what does that do for NASCAR, both of those together, do you think? And where in Europe do you think NASCAR should go?
Well, I love the idea that we have in Indianapolis, where we race on the same weekend as IndyCar, because it brings in fans from two different motorsports. I think that, yes, Le Mans was great for NASCAR on a whole. This is the first road course that we've driven since then, so it will definitely have a lot of eyes on it from European fans. Yeah, the car's different, but it kind of looks very similar. It sounds very similar. And there's 38 of them, not just one out on track, doing more of a show like we were at Le Mans. So, yeah, I think we will pull in a lot of fans. We need to have a good race, you're right. I think if everyone's just crashing into each other, which I know is kind of, there's no rules in terms of how aggressive you can be. Well, there is to a point, but it's a very aggressive series. And I think a lot of European fans aren't used to that. And I think that's going to be the hurdle for them. Can they get into the style of driving, or are they going to switch off because it's nothing like any other type of racing? So I think this circuit will be helpful for us in terms of our racing, because we can't be too aggressive. So hopefully it will make for good racing, good overtaking moves, you know, and that when you make that move down the inside and it's clean, it's like, wow, that was awesome. So I think that if we can have a good race this weekend, yes, it's great for the fan base of NASCAR, bringing in new fans, and racing in Europe. You know, Brands Hatch Indy Circuit would be amazing, because it's almost an oval anyway. So that would be a lot of fun.
Well, if they're not all crashing into each other, but they're aggressive, maybe the Europeans will love the drama. They could be addicted to it. Maybe they'll love it.
I think we all love drama, and that's why we like behind the scenes of motor racing, like, you know, Drive to Survive for Formula One. It's got a big fan base because people see the personalities. They see behind the scenes of the sport. Otherwise, they just see drivers driving around with crash helmets on. So, and I think that's what's going to help NASCAR, if we can find a way to bring fans in and they understand the personalities in the sport behind the series. That's key as well. It's not just 38 guys driving around, and they don't know who they are. You know, it's important for them to know the individuals, for them to support one or two of them, and they've got someone to back. So I think that's what we could still build on here. I'm not sure the drivers would be a fan of it, but I'm just talking, you know, this is what I think would help the sport.
All right, we'll take one final question in the back. Oh, right behind you, Jake. Thank you.
Hey, Eric Anderson, WLUW Chicago. Here in the Chicago radio scene, we're dying to know what songs are going to be on your playlist to get your head in the game, get you feeling the speed in the next couple of days.
It's funny, actually. The last couple of years of F1, I used to listen to reggae because I have so much energy already that I needed to calm myself down. Coffee was off. I couldn't drink coffee before the race because my foot would be doing this on the gas pedal. In my early years, it was Rage Against the Machine, and that got me into a lot of trouble. But now it is definitely more country music. Basically because I need to keep myself calm and my head in the right space. If I listen to anything too crazy, as I said, I'm put myself in a dark place. And we don't want that before the race.
Any country artists you've been really gravitating towards, you think?
Not really, no. I mean, there isn't an individual that I really follow. Just general country music, but yeah, I'm very bad with artists' names.
All right. Jenson, thank you so much for spending an extended period amount of time with us this morning, and we really wish you the best of luck this weekend.
Thank you.